It felt like chaos to me.
We obsess a bit about the U-turn phrase in British politics.
I think that it's really important that they get a grip.
Hello, take 23. No, hello and welcome to Electoral Dysfunction from Sky News with me, Beth Rigby.
Me, Ruth Davidson.
And me, Harriet Harman.
Now, we're having an anniversary today. You might not remember what it is, but I remember it oh so clearly because it's exactly a year today that Rishi Sunak called the election in the driving rain.
God, is it only a year ago? So much has changed since then. Doesn't it seem a million miles ago? We didn't even have Trump in the White House then.
It's like another life.
Yeah.
Do you know, what I will say that's positive is at least a year on, we've got some much nicer weather this week.
Much nicer weather. I mean, I just remember the poor Bob. That's my hair. That's not a cat. Just getting absolutely rubbished up, just getting rained on. I was rained on, I looked dreadful, I was freezing, it was pissing it down in Downing Street.
It's like in a Greek tragedy where some great leader is going to come out and face disaster and the heavens open.
I know.
You know,
God.
It was a sort of meteorological/political
And you would have
event.
thought after that things might have been a bit more settled because Keir Starmer did win a massive landslide majority and a massive mandate from the public, but oh my God, it has been one thing after another. Even this week, we've had a major U-turn on a government policy on the winter fuel allowance. Harriet described it to me earlier as a 3-point turn, which was rather brilliantly clever of her, which she will explain in a bit. So you've got to carry on listening. I'm going to make her explain it right at the end. So you've got to listen to the end. And then we've had a dramatic court injunction in the middle of the night over the Chagos deal. We're recording this on Thursday morning, so it might all be sorted by the time you listen to this. It might not. And we had a huge summit with the EU, and it's Thursday, and I'm knackered. Honestly.
I'm still traumatised. So you've done a quick run through and there's been lots that's happened. You know, we've had the rise of Trump. We've had changes of government in various countries around the world. And I'm still back to that soggy lectern. And it wasn't just the rain. It was also Steve Bray, that guy that shouts in Downing Street in the background, turning his music up.
The
so you
things
couldn't
can
even
only
hear
get
what the
better.
Prime Minister was saying. And then the next day I was thinking, oh, well, at least if the launch is terrible, at least the campaign will be decent. And then the captain of the good ship United Kingdom government decided that his first visit should be to Titanic Museum in Belfast. And I thought, do you know, this isn't going to be a great campaign.
And also the Steve Bray thing outside number 10, because I remember that it was the Things Can Only Get Better theme tune, which of course was the theme tune of
Blair and Labour in 97,
the new
wasn't
Labour
it?
government. And Harriet, so the question for you is, have things only got better?
Well, they certainly were getting much worse under the Conservative government, and they are getting better, but with some bumps in the road.
Some bumps in the road, some 3-point turns. We're going to get to that. Well, look, on this episode, we're going to talk through this roller coaster week for Starmer. We'll do the huge U-turn, 3-point turn. What the hell is going on with the winter fuel allowance? What is going on in Downing Street? Why was everyone saying one thing a couple of weeks ago? We'll lift the lid on all of that a bit for you. We're going to talk a bit about the EU summit, take you behind the scenes there. And a bit later, we've got a cabinet minister coming into the studio. It's Jonathan Reynolds, who's the business secretary, also known as Johnny Reynolds. So that is how I'll refer to him in the interview. We're going to ask him about all those trade deals and the Labour psychodrama that's been playing out. One Labour insider said to me the other day, it's not no deal, it's not deal or no deal with Johnny, it's deal or 3 deals, which I found a bit like pukey, really. So we're going to get Johnny Reynolds in and I'm going to ask him about deal or 3 deals. I might ask him about some Labour psychodrama, which you no doubt will not answer, but you'll enjoy me trying, I am sure. Okay, let's crack on. Winter fuel. Where should we start? It's been a massive week in that the Prime Minister just sort of obliquely announced a massive policy change at PMQs on Wednesday. There was a backbench. This is sometimes happens at PMQs. People are placed to ask helpful questions by the whips, the people that run MPs. And Sarah Owens, the Luton MP, stood up and rather innocuously said to the Prime Minister, what are you going to do to help pensioners?
People in Luton who have worked hard all their lives, seeing their precious savings slip away. So can the Prime Minister tell us what measures he will take to help struggling pensioners in towns like mine?
I recognise that people are still feeling the pressure of the cost of living crisis, including pensioners. And as the economy improves, we want to make sure people feel those improvements in their days as their lives go forward. And that is why we want to ensure that as we go forward, more pensioners are eligible for winter fuel payments. As you would expect, Mr. Speaker, we will only make decisions we can afford. That is why we will look at that as part of a fiscal event.
I think it's interesting that he did it in Prime Minister's questions and not in a statement. And I think there's a reason for that. And the reason is that there wasn't enough substance to be the basis of a statement, because with a statement you have to set out what you're going to do and then everybody asks questions on the detail, and they're clearly not ready to do that yet. So it was a little tiny snippet in Prime Minister's questions which put it out there, but it's left a bit of a hiatus. But I butted in. Carry on, Beth.
But that's really interesting because, as Harriet said, it gets slipped out at Prime Minister's questions. As soon as he says it, I have to admit, I wasn't meant to be doing Prime Minister's questions yesterday. I was, still high from our live show on Tuesday night, our ED, Electoral Dysfunction live show. Thank you for everyone who came. We had an absolute blast. And I was going to have a non-television day on Wednesday. And then I'm in the office, I hear what he says, and I jump into the chair because I know that this is a massive moment. Because in the way it was put out, it was very low key, but what it meant was a massive deal. And actually, to be fair, Kemi Badenoch picked up on it immediately and said, "Is that a U-turn?" But Harriet's right. What the government did was they said that they are going to look at whether they can make more pensioners eligible for winter fuel at a future fiscal event. That it means, basically, just to unpack, that means budget.
Yeah, I think that's gonna unravel. But you finish off at the explainer, but it won't hold.
Harriet, just explain to people why you think that this won't last until the budget. Like, they've put out kind of a tiny piece of information that's got massive implications, but now what? Where do we go from there?
Well, if you remember, it was the very first thing that the Labour government did. So 3 weeks into the new government, they announced that the only pensioners who were going to get the winter fuel allowance were those who were on pensions credit. So you went from 11 million pensioners getting a winter fuel payment down to 1.5 million. So that was a huge issue, and it was immediately unpopular, and there's a lot of discomfiture about it, but it was around the fact that we needed to stop this money walking out the door because of the black hole in the finances. So I think it's always been contested and always been unpopular, but the final straw that broke the camel's back was the elections, the council elections and the Runcorn by-election, where the voters were, this is not the change we voted for. And at the end of the day, you cannot just keep flying in the face of what voters, particularly if they're people who previously voted for you, wanted. So the Prime Minister said the reason why he's doing this and going to make more pensioners eligible for the winter fuel payment is because more money's come into the Treasury, and therefore it's possible to give it back to some pensioners who previously haven't had it. But I don't think that that's credible as an argument, because it really is the fact that the voters just said, this is not the change we voted for, we're not going to have this. But I think the reason why I say it's not a U-turn yet, it's a 3-point turn, is because they've gone away from the direction they were in, which is sticking with the winter fuel payment, but they're not yet on the new course in a different direction, because there is a number of key issues which they haven't decided on, and they'll be going backwards and forwards.
Look, Harriet, it's uncertainty for all of us reporting on it, because, as you said, now we're going to be spending weeks trying to find out what are their options, what are they looking at, who's going to be eligible, who aren't going to be eligible, who isn't going to be eligible. We'll be looking at how are they going to fund it, when is it going to be introduced, is it going to kick in this winter, So it's just endless. It just goes on and on and on because they have announced something without actually announcing the policy, which quite honestly, if you're me, is quite irritating, if I'm honest. Can you tell? I find it irritating because it's, it's just take a decision, announce the decision, but they're doing it in a kind of drip, drip, drip way. So then that just it creates more and more speculation. But also for people out there, it's really confusing as well, right?
Well, there's uncertainty about what they're going to do and when they're going to do it, and they need to address that quickly. But there's also the issue of why they say they're doing it.
Yeah.
And they're saying they're doing it because they've got more economic headroom, but everybody kind of really thinks that it's because the voters said, we just don't agree with this and we're going to give you a thumping because this is not what we voted for. And I think it might have been better for them to say, look, we've listened. We were trying to fill the black hole. We were trying to deal with a situation which was far worse fiscally than we realised before we got into government. But we clearly made a choice that you don't agree with. So we've listened to you and we're going to change it.
Ruth, what do you make of it?
I think what Harriet said right at the beginning there about there not being enough substance on this for a statement was really, really telling. And I don't know why seasoned political operators around Keir Starmer thought they could get away with this because it's such a big issue and such a totemic one. Call me old-fashioned, but if you're announcing a new policy or a big change of policy, the kind of tradition is to explain to people who it affects, when it's going to come into force, what it costs, and where the money comes from. And they did none of that. But more fundamentally, you've had basically 9-10 months of people running around saying, this is the right thing to do. It's a hard thing to do, but it's the right thing to do. And now they're saying, oh, maybe it wasn't the right thing to do, or it was then, but we've got more money now, even though they're also saying that the Treasury's having a difficult time. We had borrowing figures out on Thursday morning that said that the Treasury's borrowing more, the government's borrowing more than they thought they were going to have to at this point. So that doesn't stack up either. It's a blancmange. It's like a soggy mess. It's what Mary Berry would call a soggy bottom.
Yeah.
And it will not stand. And also backbenchers who were loyally defending this have just been screwed, and they won't loyally defend as much in future, and they'll moan more about unpopular measures like the welfare cuts.
I want to unpack it a bit because part of this podcast is about trying to talk to you about what's going on behind the scenes and how the sausage gets made and how do we go from we're definitely not moving on this policy for 9 to 10 months to suddenly like, oh, we're going to tweak the policy, and you're like, we put a little bat signal out yesterday on Twitter and stuff, on X, asking you for your views on winter fuel allowance, and we've got absolutely tons of
so good,
tons
really
of you have
hear.
messaged in. Which one jumped out at you, Harriet?
Well, two of them. One was Michelle. If you make a mistake, correct it. The grown-ups are in charge. But then we've got Patrick. I'm not buying that the U-turn is happening because of an improving economy and not because the walloping in the council elections Labour got, with winter fuel appearing to be the main culprit. So there's two there.
Is there any jumped out at you, Ruth?
Yeah, so Steve was basically on the same lines as Patrick, but probably a little bit less parliamentary in his language, where he said Keir has zero compassion or empathy. He's not doing this because he cares about the pensioners. This U-turn is to be expected from a flip-flop liar who blows with the wind. Nothing he does will bring back any popularity. And again, it's this idea that the Labour Party's not doing this because they believe in it particularly, or it's part of their mission, or it's part of their vision for the country. It's because they got a tanking at the polls, they lost some votes, and therefore, how do we salvage this? And also, I think Sally's got a point where I think a lot of people in the country are, which is, I absolutely don't think that all pensioners should receive winter fuel payments just because they're old. There's lots of younger people in poverty who get it ahead of wealthy pensioners. Having said that, using pension credit eligibility was a blunt tool to measure poverty. It's too much of a cliff edge, and there should be a more graduated reduction of the benefit.
I just want to go back to where we were a couple of weeks ago, because we were discussing this on this podcast. If you listened, you will remember. And we were talking about how number 10 sources were very clear, but 2 weeks ago, that there was not movement on this policy. And then Harriet you were then talking about where MPs should look next. And we started talking, or you raised the possibility about looking at 2-child benefit cap and whether the government would relook at that. Were you surprised that they took this move, because we were in another world but 2 weeks ago when government figures were very clear to me, and I assume also, Harriet, to you, that they weren't moving on winter fuel allowance.
I think what really happened is that all the Labour MPs who'd been listening to what their constituents were saying, because they're on the doorstep the whole time and in their constituencies the whole time, and they knew the winter fuel payment was really, really unpopular. But it was when it came to the vote and the people who'd previously voted them in were all saying, we're not going to vote for you again. That somehow was the actual moment of change.
The bit that got me, Beth, and I think maybe you can kind of explain all of this. So we know that Prime Minister's Questions is on a Wednesday. Clearly the government knew that they were about to drop this in there because they set up the question so that Starmer was able to do the policy shift. Why on earth was Rachel Reeves as Chancellor sent out on the breakfast media round doing that great tradition that Chancellors do, which is wearing a high-vis jacket in bright orange with the reflective stripes, and being asked about it and having to bat it back then, so that 3-4 hours later the Prime Minister kind of gazumps her with it, and then they have to put out a statement saying, oh, no, number 10 and number 11 are in lockstep on this. And what I'm really interested to know is, if you've had your ear to the ground, is are number 10 and number 11 in lockstep on this?
A source from the Treasury tells me, because I raised this with them, that the Chancellor said what she said on Wednesday morning because she wanted to make sure that the Prime Minister announced the policy change in the chamber, and that she was absolutely involved in all of this. Number 10 and number 11 sources saying this was a joint decision. I just would like just to unpack this for a couple of minutes, because I think it actually matters I want to explain to you all about how things sometimes happen in government and what's going on behind the scenes in this world in which it's all sources and briefings and counter briefings. Basically what happened was, a couple of weeks ago, the excellent Pippa Creer from The Guardian wrote a story saying the government are looking at winter fuel allowance again. And it was a massive, it was a kind of, it was a lightning rod. It was a great story, and it set the hair running. That was clearly true. Yeah, that was clearly true. You're both absolutely right. You know it, Harriet, you will know from MPs as well. They were completely spooked by the local elections. It showed that the policy, whilst people had talked about it being unpopular, as one Labour figure said to me, it wasn't just theoretical now. It was hurting them at the ballot box, and they began to take fright. There was nervousness in number 10. This was a Rachel Reeves policy. She announced it. The Prime Minister agreed to it, but it was her policy. She fronted it. She stuck by it. The Prime Minister stuck behind her. And this is when the split began between number 10 and number 11. So number 10 then starts saying, let's have a look at it again. And as I understand it, they commissioned some research. They commissioned some focus groups to actually say, if we start tweaking the policy, how might that play out? But it's more complicated than that, because I also think, and this is more my sense rather than someone saying to it, I think there was a split in Downing Street. I think there's been a division within Downing Street, as Harriet was saying just a couple of weeks ago on the pod. You've taken the political pain for it. You've taken the decision. You've explained why you've taken the decision. You've burnt through shitloads of political capital on the decision. If you now reverse on the decision, you one look weak. You've taken the political hit anyway. And as you said, Ruth, you just open the door for loads of people to see that you can be bounced and make more demands on you. And then there was another wing in Downing Street that went, it was a really bad policy. We let it pass. The Chancellor did it. We need to reverse on it. And I think that side won out. The one other thing I would say, if I may, because I'm sort of about this, is that, sources within government keep saying that number 10 and number 11, it's all a nest of singing birds. Other sources are telling me that isn't correct. And one person said to me yesterday that number 10 seem really annoyed at Rachel Reeves at the moment, that she has tested their patience, that there is palpable tensions between the sort of teams around the principals, so the teams around... Harriet, you're shaking head, but that's sort of some of the noise I'm picking up. Clearly, there are tensions when one bit of government is saying one thing, other stories are being briefed out. I mean, on television, I sort of reflected some of the things I've been picking up and reported this talk within Whitehall about some tensions between number 11 and number 10. And I should say that some of those in the Treasury messaged me and said that is simply not true. I need to reflect what they've told me. They said there are not tensions. But that's not what other people are sensing and seeing. And the fact is that Rachel Reeves fronted up this policy. It was her policy, really. She announced it very soon after the general election. It was supported by the Prime Minister. It looks like number 10, under the pressure of the ballot box, have had second thoughts, and they've effectively asked her to row back on it. And I first got wind that it was, despite number 10 sources insisting that there was no change. Last week I had a drink with someone in government and asked them about it, and they just said, oh, we'll see what happens. And then they said, oh, it will be difficult for Rachel Reeves. And at that point, you know what's coming. I just want to ask you, Harriet, how damaging is this, do you think, for Rachel Reeves?
I think that it's really important that they get a grip and they shut down this talk about there being blaming from number 10 of Rachel Reeves, because that will create really bad instability. So if it's true that there's bad relations, they need to mend those relations right away.
Have you picked up any of that?
No, I haven't, but you can see it all over the briefings and all over the papers, and that can then create the problem. So either there's a problem that's being reflected, or the briefings will create a problem because people will start feeling defensive and they'll be, then hitting back. So if there isn't a problem, they need to shut down all the briefings and demonstrate that there is no problem. And if there is a problem between number 10 and number 11, they need to sort it fast.
I've got a question for Harriet. Do you think that actually there will be any electoral credit given for this partial U-turn? Because I kind of don't see it myself, but I'm really interested to hear what Harriet thinks.
I think it's about stopping it getting worse rather than expecting everybody to be hugely grateful. I think they need to cauterise the damage on the winter fuel payment and do that quickly. But then they're moving on to the child poverty strategy. And that's another very big Labour values issue that is going to be coming out next month. So there's a wider context.
Okay, just quickly, number one, do you agree that, because I always got the impression from you, and we've talked about this before on the pod, that you thought that they should stand firm on winter fuel allowance. What do you think?
I thought they would. I think once you're in a situation where the voters are saying, sorry, we don't care what you say about this, we're not having it, you just have no option. Okay. And that's what they were presented with. But the question is how they move forward from here on the winter fuel payment change, and they need to do that quickly. And also what they do in the child poverty strategy, because actually, after the triple lock has helped pensioners, a bigger problem is working families with young children who are struggling to make ends meet. And it's the child poverty strategy and it's the welfare into work processes which are going to be incredibly important.
So what do you think on that?
Well, I did hear, and I couldn't believe my ears, and I thought, no, please let this not be true, that they would change the 2-child benefit cap, which says you can't get payments for children beyond 2 children. And that was the Tory policy, the 2-child cap. But that they would make it a 3-child cap. And I thought, oh my God, so the policy is Labour will let you have an extra child or pay for one extra child. I sort of felt incredulity at that point. And I really do think that would just be the worst of all worlds. I hope whoever was floating that idea has thought better of it.
I actually think that the blowback from the way they've announced this partial U-turn of pensioners' fuel allowance is they will have to learn from this. If they're going to touch this, they've got to know what they're doing. They've got to be able to announce it all in one go. It's going to have to be a sweeping change. They can't just nibble at the edges and then say, and we'll tell you 4 months from now in a budget what's actually going to happen.
What's also interesting, and you touched on this earlier, Ruth, that they've got a welfare vote coming up next month, around the benefit cuts that they have announced around the welfare reforms. And it's not just winter fuel allowance. People are really agitated about child poverty. People are agitated on the benches. I mean, when I say people, MPs
Disability,
are agitated.
that's a big one. I think that's going to be the biggest fight.
The disability benefits, the 2-child cap. So already now there's rumours and talk, and there's another piece by Pippa Creer in The Guardian this morning on Thursday about them looking at about the poverty reduction strategy, and what about the 2-child benefit cap, and what about disability, and MPs clamouring for more, and Number 10 putting things back on the table. And I'm also picking up that some of these elements could be in play. So, I mean, it's kind of like you're opening the floodgates a bit here, huh?
I don't think there's any Labour MPs who support the 2-child benefit cap. They totally oppose it. The question is how you find the money to reverse it, and what has to be sacrificed, or what else the money could be going on. But I think there was some feeling that if they U-turned on winter fuel payment, then that would assuage people, and therefore they'd be more likely to vote for the disability benefit cuts that are coming along in the welfare bill. We'll see which way that will go.
Seriously, Harriet, this is a mess.
If next month we've got to say you've got to vote for these cuts on disability because we haven't got enough money, that's why it would have been better for them to say, actually, we've thought again about it because the public really don't believe this is what a Labour government should be doing.
This question has been in my mind. Indulge me, Harriet, you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. I feel a bit like at the moment, and I have done politics for a long old time, they have come in with a massive majority, a clear programme for government in Starmer's mind about national renewal over a decade, very clear that they have to make difficult economic decisions. They're about 3 to 4 years out from a general election, depending on when they call it. And they had a massive psychodrama in the first 100 days over Sue Gray and the chief of staff and how they were running Downing Street, and that all blew up. And now, a few months later, you're in another psychodrama about welfare cuts and local elections. I mean, what on earth is going on? Is that not just an argument, as Ruth said, just to say, get a grip? You've got a massive majority. You're really far out from election. You knew it was going to be really tough. Like, why are you, hold your nerve and just get on with it and stop arguing, fighting like ferrets in a sack?
Well, I do think fundamentally there is still a unity in the Labour Party, and there is political stability, but there are definite squalls along the way. And I think that they can be disproportionately demoralising. And we don't want the sense to creep up that somehow the government is not in control and is chaotic, because I think fundamentally it isn't. And you can see on all the big things they're doing, whether it's on the trade deals, whether it's on the health service or education, that it is pressing forward. But these things can be disproportionately worrying and distracting. So I think they need to, it's like Number 10 needs to, working in absolute lockstep with Number 11, get a grip on, sort this out. I think that's what the public want to see. They don't want to see, things being ragged in Number 10.
This all comes down to money, because part of this was how they managed to, or were planning to manage to move forward this national renewal and all the rest of it, was about sorting out the finances, and then eventually, by the end of their first term, being able to spend the proceeds of growth. And that's partly been derailed because of internal UK factors, but also these Trump tariffs. We're left with an economic mess, both macro and microeconomic mess, of what does the future economy of the UK look like? And the economy is so pivotal to how you make societal changes, because that's how you pay for it.
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be another rocky few months for the Chancellor, for sure, as they try and grapple with all of what you're saying, Ruth, about the tariffs, borrowing going up, and increasing demands to find money in order to reverse some of the cuts that they've announced. We have run out of time, so we can't actually get onto the EU-UK stuff, which is annoying because Ruth is an expert on fishing. She knows everything.
I'm not, but I've had to learn a lot about it in my time.
But we're going to have to end it there for now, because Ruth and Harriet are skedaddling off. And I'm going to stay on, and I think we've got Johnny Reynolds coming in, and we can talk to him. Actually, we can talk to him a bit about the EU-UK deal. So look, bye for now, Harriet
Bye-bye.
and Ruth.
Bye-bye, and thanks for all your messages this week about winter fuel. It was really interesting to hear what you were thinking and how you think about it. But actually, you can get in touch with us on the burner phone at any time, and the number to WhatsApp is 07934 200 444, or email electoraldysfunction@sky.uk.
Yeah, we do try and be as responsive to what you want to talk about. So, as Harriet says, 07934 200 444.
Okay. Bye, ladies.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hello, we are back from the break and I'm here with Jonathan Reynolds. He's also known as Johnny, but there is one person in his life that insists he is Jonathan. Who is that?
That person, very special person, is my mum, Judith Reynolds, because she hates Johnny. Everyone calls me Johnny. Everyone is aware that the Prime Minister calls me Johnny. Everyone, all friends and colleagues, but she hates Johnny so much. It is true that when I was a teenager, she jokingly said, if you ever become even remotely famous, you're in the papers, you must promise me it'll be Jonathan, not Johnny. And to this day, the style guide for all journalists, it is Jonathan. So if Mum's listening, she's going to really like that, Beth.
And Judith Reynolds, I should also tell you that my late mum, Edith, she also liked me being known as Elizabeth in the newspapers.
Yeah.
So when I was a print journalist, I was always Elizabeth Rigby. So it amused me. I quite like the idea. And my brother's called Jonathan. But we're not here to talk about that, are we? And after this podcast, you're going on the train somewhere.
I have got some business visits on a Thursday. Then I get back home to Staley Bridge, which is my constituency where we live. And then I've got a constituency day. But I'm also, to be frank, thinking a lot about the weekend. I'm going to come back to London because you may know Sunderland play Sheffield United in the playoff final.
Tell me what that means to you and why.
Well, first of all, everyone knows what it means to be in the Premier League. But I'm obsessed by Sunderland Football Club. I was at the semi-final, so we're playing Coventry. It had been quite a busy week. Few things had happened. The US deal, the India deal had come off. I was just in the stands, just talking to people you went to school with, people you recognise, other people, and it's just lovely. I sometimes say to people, when you're young, you dream of turning out at Wembley for your football club, being a striker. When you get to my age, you sort of dream now of being, a non-exec director after you're a politician or something like that. But it's a lovely part of me, and I just think, football matches, music festivals, church gatherings are the only places, I think, where you're part of this collective emotional experience.
Do you talk to the Prime Minister about football a lot?
Yeah.
Do you? Is that all you talk about?
Not all we talk about. We've got some items of business as well. But the Prime Minister loves his football.
He's obsessed.
He loves his football.
I didn't know you were this obsessed either. I've just found this out.
Well, I often think there are a lot of similarities between politics and football, right? If you think about how you put together a cabinet or a government, you've got to have people in the right positions. You've got to have the right teams. I think, I like to think of me and Rachel Reeves as a sort of strike partnership on the economic side of the government. Actually, I think maybe being business and trade is sort of like being, I don't know, a box-to-box midfielder. You're kind of linking up all the other departments and sections of it. But yeah,
Well, I want to get onto the team moving the ball up the field together or not a bit later on. Did you like that?
That's very skillful.
I want to talk to you a bit later. I'm going to talk to you about the winter fuel allowance stuff. But before we get onto that, I wanted to start with the trade deals, because we didn't actually in this pod, we were going to talk about the EU-UK one, which was announced on Monday. But we got so bogged down in winter fuel. But let's start with the trade deals for you. Now, do you watch Antiques Roadshow?
I haven't watched it for a few years.
Do you know the thing about good, better, best? Have you seen? Do you know what that is?
I've not seen that, no.
Okay, so Fiona Bruce gets 3 objects, and she has to guess which is good, better, best, i.e. what's the cheapest to most valuable. So I want to ask you this. This is the sort of genius idea I come up with on this podcast. So you've got 3 trade deals. You've got US, India, Europe, good, better, best, please.
So I've got one with the biggest economy in the world, with the fastest growing economy in the world, and with our biggest trading partner in the world. That's
such a humble brag. Can I just get to cut to the chase here?
Well, I think so. I tell you, for the best one, India is the biggest trade deal the UK has done since Brexit, and it is the best deal India's ever done. And people might know India is obviously huge economy, and it is, whether it's goods or services, we're the only other country in the world now that can be part of Indian government procurement, which for the services sector is really important. So it is, as a trade agreement, really, really first class. The US is a little bit different because it's more about how you react to the quite difficult agenda the US has got. It's a kind of what's your relative position to other countries as part of that. So it shouldn't be quite classed. That's, in traditional trade deal terms, that's a less good one because it's about that. But it has saved, thousands of jobs. So I'm very proud of that as well. The EU, a lot of people said we couldn't get a better deal without revisiting things like freedom of movement, and we've shown that we can. And actually, we didn't get everything I wanted in that deal, but we got some really good things.
What didn't you get that you wanted?
So I think there is still, bearing in mind Europe's a very diverse place with different member states. I would like Europe to recognise across the board that we are not going to rejoin the European Union. We're not going to be asking to be treated like a member state, but we're not a strategic competitor. Europe's success is our success because it's such a big market for us. We will not tackle illegal migration or climate unless we can work with our European partners. We will always, quite rightly, be a part of the defence and security of the continent which we share. So I think it is a different relationship with the EU, but it is, I think, the start of a process. There are other things in future that we'd want to do. There's no doubt this government was elected on a manifesto and is absolutely adamant. We don't want to relive those arguments in the past. I know there'll be people listening who really feel strongly about that referendum still. I really understand that, but I think we have to look to the future, and this is what we're doing.
Just going back to the deals quickly, when you said kind of going back to my good, better, best, for the EU UK, by 2040, it will be 0.3% of GDP added to the economy. That's about £9 billion a year. To put it into context, the hit of Brexit was to cost the economy, or the economy would be 4% in terms of GDP less well off than it would have been had we stayed in the EU. So I'm just making that point to show that this is quite at the edges. The UK aimed to do 4.8 billion a year by 2040. US still, you don't have what it's going to grow the economy by, presumably because it's not.
We will, because the reciprocal tariffs, that's still part of the negotiation. So you do that assessment. I mean, I think we should, as a country, recognise, leaving a European Union, leaving an integrated single market, there's a cost to that. People know that. They felt that. I do think we should stop comparing any trade agreements we strike to the loss from leaving the single market, because that is a decision the country took.
And then on the US, look, the fact is that it is of course, we've got worse trading arrangements with the US than we did before President Trump came into the White House, because although you managed to get the tariffs reduced for car exports, which actually did save many thousands of jobs, presumably, and then you got the tariffs reduced to 0% for steel. We've still got the flat rate of 10%. So we are worse off than we were under a Trump White House. What's the next steps for that deal? Because Trump was in the White House going, it's a massive deal. And when you actually look at the substance, it was a very narrow and thin deal, actually, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we couldn't agree on the reciprocal tariffs. That's the 10%. We had got a good thing in place on the sectoral tariffs. The challenge for me was that very week. So we had a week where, frankly, almost nearly all of these deals could have concluded on the same day, which would have been a bit of a challenge, just logistically. But if we hadn't announced the sectoral tariff breakthrough, companies, particularly in automotive and to an extent aerospace, but pharma, steel, they have to start announcing to their shareholders how they would cope with a world where, particularly for automotive, a 27.5% tariff. It's the higher value vehicles we sell, quite a lot of these. So an Aston Martin or a Bentley or a premium JLR vehicle, it's a lot, right? So they would have announced restructuring, i.e. significant job losses, very, very painful.
And when was that going to happen? I heard it was going to happen like last week, beginning of last week.
If we hadn't made the breakthrough on the US deal, I think we announced that on the Monday, it would have been the Tuesday and Wednesday of that week. So it was a lot. But the next stage is continuing this deal. There are lots of things, and I know people have looked, the issue that always dominates is agriculture and meat. The UK is already a big importer of US agriculture. We've maintained our red lines. We're not going to change to their food production standards. It's a manifesto commitment.
Presumably also the EU deal makes that harder anyway, right?
Well,
you've got to align to EU standards on animal products now anyway, haven't you?
It's that we want to do that because we've got the same standards.
I mean, that makes it impossible with the US anyway, doesn't it? Even if you wanted to.
It doesn't change our negotiating position, but yeah, we've got to look at where does our trade go? How do you maintain those standards, reduce those frictions? But we've shown we can do it. But we could do something ambitious with the US. They've got to be ambitious too. I mean, it's hard, but it's hard because it should be hard. And it's hard because it matters to people.
Where are you going next on with the US? What's the next steps? Can you Is there anything new coming up you can tell us about?
Well, so we continue to negotiate. We've got some people there right now on the reciprocal tariffs. I think there are choices for the US as to how big that could go. So technical point that's quite important for listeners is the US tariffs that the president's put in place are sort of under emergency powers he has.
Yeah.
He has to go to Congress to change their floor of tariffs, what we would call in the jargon their MFN tariffs, their most favoured nation. That's what everyone gets. Now, we could go beyond that. I think that might be hard for the US, but we could certainly get to a point where in both of our interests we're reducing the costs of goods in each other's country, and we are, I would say, I think we could do some things with the US to make it easier for businesses to access each other's markets.
Do you think you could, hang on, just, are you saying that you think that you can get below the flat rate of 10%?
If the US is willing to get there, absolutely.
On what? And you're actively talking to that?
That has always been the basis. We couldn't agree that before.
Want to? Do you think they want to?
I think it's quite important to them. They've got a number of things going on, including the suggestion that tariffs have to raise revenue to pay for tax cuts and things like that. So there's a domestic political agenda there. But you can look. There's two ways you look at trade when you're looking at tariffs, and bear in mind most of our economy is services, not goods. But if you're looking at goods, which is a big thing for the US, you can take the average in both countries, and it's quite low for the UK because we're not a high tariff economy. Or you can look at what we call the trade weighted. So what you're actually trading in. If I have a big tariff on something that I don't buy from you, does it really matter? We can look at the actual business we do together, and I think we could make some progress on that.
Okay, well, look, I mean, you've talked a lot about the trade deals, and actually, I know there's been some opposition criticism, but I think in business communities, aside from the fishing industry that really hate the EU-UK deal because you're giving long access to UK waters.
But the same arrangements as now. It's not a
but extended for 12 years. But otherwise, you've been positively received. Winter fuel, though. Winter fuel, what on earth is going on?
My view is exactly what the Prime Minister said yesterday, which is, of course, it's difficult to reduce eligibility to take something from people. The economy was in a right mess when we took over. We're starting to see the signs, actually, of real progress. You'd want that to put you in a position where you can make a decision at a future, what we call a fiscal event, a budget, where you can look at that. But you can't have the good things without that discipline, without that commitment.
Did you want them to change the policy?
Look, I want, first of all, what I care about the most is how strong is the economy and the options that gives us. And my view has always been, a lot of the budgets I shadowed, when I was a shadow Treasury Minister for Labour and then obviously working pensions and then business and trade. My view is the country does budgets a lot of the time by sort of saying, how much do we need to give to health and education and some other things? And then what have we got left for kind of industrial policy of the economy? I think we should do it the other way around. I think we've got to start saying 1% growth. You've left the European Union. You have an ageing population. No one's going to get anything what they want unless the economy's performing more strongly. So for me, I start every budget by thinking, what do we need on the economic side to generate the means to have these things? But of course, like the Prime Minister said, I want the proceeds of growth to go to looking after people, to making sure they've got what they need. I do think the triple lock commitment the government has is a bigger commitment than anything else
so,
in
Johnny,
the space for
I'm going to
pensions.
just, instead of me asking, we messaged a load of listeners yesterday and said, what do you make of the winter fuel U-turn? And I mean, this is from Michelle. She said, if you make a mistake, correct it. The grown-ups are in charge. Owen said, I'd much rather have a government who listens to the public than one who ignores them until they need their vote again. Patrick said, I'm not buying that the U-turn is happening because of an improving economy and not because of the walloping in the council elections Labour got, with winter fuel appearing to be the main culprit.
Some pretty wise and perceptive comments, I think, from there. I mean, I agree, by the way, that any government, talking in abstract terms, if you have made a decision and you want to feel, you recognise you want to do something different. I think that's actually a position of strength, not of weakness. I think we obsess a bit about the U-turn phrase in British politics. But, it is, on the last comment, it is simply true to say, unless the economy performs more strongly, everyone will feel a sense of frustration for many years. And I do think the relative position the UK is now in, and people recognising there's real substance to our growth mission and agenda, gives us the potential to look at things.
But Johnny, what Patrick's actually saying there is that the U-turn, he's saying, just acknowledge also it became because of the ballot box, because actually voters hated it. And what happened was you made a really difficult decision. You stood by the difficult decision for 10 months. Then there were elections, and the reality of what people were saying was borne out at the ballot box.
Well,
that's true too, isn't it? I know you're framing it as a growing economy, but that is the truth, isn't it?
I don't think anyone was under any illusion pre-local elections that this wasn't a significant issue for the public. I mean, let's be frank.
But that prompted the rethink, right?
I don't want to sound blasé about it, but midterm elections are always quite difficult.
No, but that prompted the Can we just sort of live in a real universe here where, that is what prompted the rethink, that maybe it was the policy.
You can't have, I don't want to sound like I'm being smug, but you can't have a rethink unless you've got the means, the capacity to be able to rethink anything. And I think what we have seen, particularly the last set of growth figures, is really, really encouraging for the approach that we are taking, for that stability, that openness, that pro-business agenda. And so, look, you could say what prompted...
So are you making the decision because Rachel Reeves suddenly has found more money, or are you making the decision because voters really did dislike this policy and it was a policy that was going to hurt Labour and maybe not a great idea?
Any government is always listening, whether you are doing so for election results or for what people tell you.
But we still don't know what's going to actually happen with the winter fuel allowance, do we?
No, and the Prime Minister said we're always listening, we're looking at things, but that's got to be part of proper events where you present the whole package.
So if the economy begins to contract again, he won't do it in the autumn?
Look, it goes back to what he said. The economy has got to be strong enough to give you the capacity to make the kind of decisions people want us to see. We want people to know we're listening. We know how they feel about this. Well, look, you've got to wait till the budget. And look, the speculation on these things, because it has been very, very high profile, I understand the interest in it. But again, you've got to be frank and honest with people about what it requires to do these things.
Can I be frank and honest as someone that covers the government? It felt like chaos to me. It felt like chaos. I was told 2 weeks ago, you're absolutely not changing the policy. The Chancellor goes out for months saying she's not changing the policy. The Prime Minister goes out for months saying he's not changing the policy. Then there's leaks suggesting they are changing the policy. And then the Chancellor comes out in the morning on Wednesday and says the policy still stands. And then the Prime Minister stands up in Prime Minister's questions and says, I've changed the policy. I'm like, what the actual is going on here?
Do you know what I feel as a politician?
It's a bit nuts.
Do you know what I feel as a politician? You're running up to a budget and people will say, can you promise you'll do this, or you can promise that? And you say, look, you're going to have to wait till the budget.
Do you get what I mean? Do you see how it looks?
Let me just tell you how it feels on the other side, right? Which is people, they'll say, can you confirm you'll definitely do this? And you say, no, I can't confirm that because it's got a budget coming up. And then there'll be a story saying, government refuses to rule out, taxing pasties like George Osborne did. And you're kind of like, it's impossible. And the day you get past a budget, the speculation begins on the next budget. And sometimes you have to say, look, there's a way to do these things. Of course, you've got to respond to what the public are telling you, but you have to do it. And all the Prime Minister has said is, look, he's listening, he's aware of it. He wants a stronger economy to be able to deliver for people. You'd have to wait for the actual budget to do that. But sometimes we just, it feels like we're always obsessed in British politics about the process.
Does it not? Yeah, but it seems a bit messy. Do you see what I mean? It's like, it seems messy.
I think it is if you have this constant speculation on it. But I think what the Prime Minister set out, which is, we know it's a thing for people. Yes, we are listening. This is how we see it. This is what we want to do. You've got to wait for the budget for that.
But it's still messy because there's still going to be now months more speculation about is he going to do it, isn't he going to do it? Who's going to be eligible, who isn't going to be eligible? Is it going to kick in this winter? Isn't it going to kick in this winter? So it's still...
Yeah. Look, I think what I would absolutely say is, I suppose the frustration for me is if you think about the commitment to the triple lock, which is big money, as you know. I mean, this is promising pensioners will be better off every year and more national income will go towards pensioners and the pension to do that. That is a huge commitment. And it is, you do feel sometimes that bigger commitment doesn't obviously get that attention because we're all talking about this, of course, because of the political to and fro on it. And that's a job that for government, whatever side you're from when you're in power, to make sure people do know, well, what's the whole picture? What's the agenda? And I think, that's a big commitment, the right commitment for pensioners.
Okay. I'm quite enjoying myself. I don't know if you're enjoying. Are you enjoying it, Johnny?
I love podcasts, partly because I travel to and from Manchester many times a week, but that's when I listen to my podcasts.
I enjoy podcasts too, but we're out of time apparently, so I've only got one question left. But if you know my interviews, you'll know that one question means four.
Yeah,
but
absolutely. I'd be disappointed if it wasn't.
If I don't say just one last question 4 times. No, but I've got a last question for you, which I'm going to make up on the hoof, because we've just been talking about some of the things that you've done that you're really proud of, which are the trade deals, and then some of the other things that are happening that are a bit more scratchy for Labour. And I think we can agree if you won't use the word chaotic and messy, they're my words, not your words, you might say it has been scratchy. Would you agree with that?
Look, I mean, government is... There's a million things going on every day. And I think you're always trying to get a hearing for what you are doing. I mean, I look back, we're almost coming up to a year. And I think everything from... our employment rights bill is going to change a lot of people's lives in my area. The change to the living wage, real pay rise for people. What we did on British steel, I showed you at the beginning. I've got some British steel with me from the blast furnaces at Scunthorpe that I made with my own fair hands with the means of production. I look at where the industrial strategy is going, these trade deals and what they mean. There's a lot to be proud of, but you've got to fight for attention in those things. And I understand, as ever, there'll be things going in other government departments. You're always kind of fighting for what's the story, how it is. And there are lessons. I mean, when we talk about how governments communicate, I think it's just about what you're saying on a day, what's in the grid. I mean, it's the story you're trying to tell. And this is a government that's genuinely trying to rebuild the country from a pretty difficult period. I think I could tell, all of us in the team, could be more colourful and more human in how we tell that story. I think that's a lesson to take.
Do you think you need a better story to tell? It seems to me like you're doing stuff, like you've just announced loads, you've just reminded us of loads of things the government's actually doing, but there's not really the vision.
Well, I think it's not the vision, it's about how you communicate, in a quite a colourful way that's not dry and technical, what we're trying to do.
My final question was, what would you give the government out of 10 in terms of performance to date?
Honestly, for my area, I'd score it quite high. I don't want to be immodest, but I know what we're doing and I know the difference it has made. I think for the whole government, you'd give it a 7 or 8 because you're always got to be humble and recognise improvements. And we've talked about some of the areas where, we need to do that. But if you look around the world, as I say, who are the countries that have got this kind of stability, this openness to the world, this ability to work with business, to really turn around the economy? Because people want to be better off, right? They want to feel better off, and they won't care what I'm saying until they feel better off. But this is how you do it. And I look at the extremes of left and right at the minute with the easy answers to complex problems. Like, there's some people on my side who'll say, let's just have a wealth tax. And I say, well, can you tell me where in the world do you think that's working? And they haven't got any examples of that for good reasons. On the right, you've got people, let's abolish a certain tax, inheritance tax or something like that. And again, you say you think it's as easy as that. Now, what is the answer? Is serious government working constructively with business, with other stakeholders in society, making a real difference. That's how you get that long-term change. It is less catchy in a social media age, I think, to be, serious long-term policy hasn't got the same as here's my easy answer, whether it's this side or this side of the divide. Again, that's a challenge. No point complaining about it. We've got to find a way through that. So, of course, we know there's things we've got to do better, but we know at the heart of that is until people feel better off, see better public services, see that sense of optimism in the communities, they're going to be scratchy, right? That's fair.
Before I let you go, because obviously everyone's glaring at me now, just to be really clear, because I'm a little bit confused now, and if I'm confused, listeners will be, is the Prime Minister going to change the winter fuel allowance at the budget, or is it subject to the economic outlook?
Look, I can only repeat what he said at the dispatch box yesterday when I was sat next to him, which is he recognises how people feel about this. He wants more people to have the kind of support that we're trying to put in place. He's got to wait to a fiscal event, a budget, in order to make announcements on that. Okay,
and then on that, disability cuts, the child poverty strategy, do you think there will be other tweaks to come?
Look, the situation in the UK and how after the fall of the Labour government in 2010, we saw this genuinely incredible increase in child poverty from the trajectory we were on to where it went to. Everyone in this government wants the kind of progress on child poverty which the previous Labour government delivered.
But as a dad of 4 kids, and your wife Claire, she works in Down Street, you're well-paid people, but as a dad of 4 kids, would you like to see the 2-child cap lifted if possible? And I'm asking you as a personally there, not as a government. You don't have to put your government hat on.
I always have to answer from a collective position of responsibility. But I want to see real progress on child poverty. I want an economy and a political environment which is more pro-family, in that our employment rights are a big part of that. It's things that will make a real difference to people's lives. I don't think it's just about how you account for family size in the social security system. I think it's a bit more than that. But I do think family life is like the foundation of everything, whether that's your public services, your political system, your economy.
And just on, I mentioned that you've got 4 children. You've got 3 children with your wife Claire, and you've got an older son from a previous relationship. And what people might not know is that Claire, your wife, is the political director in Downing Street. Can you explain what that means if you're a political director in Downing Street? And then can you tell me how on earth you both make this work?
Yeah, so the political director, all prime ministers have this, that it manages some of the key relationship, the politics of the job as opposed to the policy and government side around that. So I think we play it down a little bit as a couple, but obviously I'm hugely proud of her. I think she's a great appointment by the Prime Minister. And also, she was, before that, the director of something called Labour Women's Network. So a lot of our new, particularly female MPs, she has been a key part of training them, of finding that talent and bringing them in. So I might be the Secretary of State and the President of the Board of Trade, but for quite a lot of people, I'm Claire's husband. And I'm quite proud of that as well.
You know that you're number 2 on the Politico power list in Westminster, beaten only by Morgan McSweeney, the PM's Chief of Staff, and his wife Imogen Walker, who's an MP and also the private secretary to Rachel Reeves. How does that feel? The working class boy from Sunderland becoming a power couple in Westminster?
Well, it's nice to be recognised. I think I joked to Morgan, he and Isabel must have got the Barnett formula to get into number 1, actually, and we could have been contenders for that. But no, there was a moment this week. I was at it was one of the Buckingham Palace garden parties, and I was talking to a member of the royal family, and the Lord Mayor tapped me on the shoulder to say, looking forward to the meeting of the Board of Trade tomorrow. And I thought, this is an interesting moment for a working class guy to be in. And look, I've always, again, it comes down to the fact that it's not so much the attention you get for these things or those nicer bits like being in a garden party. There are things, and British Steel was a big part of this. There are things we did there that really resonate from being, growing up in Sunderland, those big industrial changes, not handled well, let's be honest, the shipyards and the mines closing. We didn't take people through that. We couldn't hold on to the past. We could have helped people to the future a bit better. And I think you have to understand a bit of that to do this job well. And I feel I do, and I'm lucky to be an MP in Tameside in the eastern side of Manchester, where, again, there's very similar themes as part of that. And so I think, it's an interesting personal experience, but it's about how you do the job as well.
OK. Look, Johnny, I've got to let you go. Good luck for the final on Saturday. I will be watching it as well.
It's the best game of the year. It's the best game of the year. The player.
So good luck. I hope that you succeed and you're back in the Premier League, and then maybe you and Keir Starmer can go to a match together when your two sides fight it out. He's near the top of the league. You'll be right at the bottom, but probably climbing, you think?
I think that's a bit pessimistic, Beth. I think you're underestimating the historical recession. Labour and Sunderland together, it's been some tough years, but we've had some good years. So the Peter Reid era was the sort of Tony Blair era. Maybe the Regis Lebris and Keir Starmer era could be something we talk about in future.
Well, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Bye-bye.